The early morning sun cast long stripes across the time-worn wood floors of my bedroom. I remained in bed, taking in the familiar sounds of the house settling and the steady ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. At 78, one learns to cherish these small affirmations of existence, especially in a home that has grown quiet. My Clara passed on 3 years back. Pancreatic cancer moves with a cruel and devastating speed. After 52 years of marriage, I was suddenly navigating a profound emptiness. Her pillow still occupies its space beside mine, and on some nights, I awaken and instinctively reach for her, my hand finding only the cool expanse of empty sheets. A familiar stiffness in my joints made getting out of bed a struggle. The physicians label it arthritis, I simply call it the toll of years. After putting on my glasses, I made my way to the kitchen for my established morning ritual, a cup of black coffee, a slice of toast with peanut butter, and the daily newspaper. These are the simple comforts that remain. My house here in this quiet corner of town is not the sort you'd find in a glossy magazine. It is a modest 2-story home with a small garden I no longer have the energy to tend properly, but it was ours. Clara's and mine. We purchased it 4 decades ago following a promotion I received at the accounting firm. We paid off the mortgage in 15 years, meticulously saving for every goal. I have always been prudent with our finances. Not miserly, just methodical. Clara used to chuckle, calling me an accountant to my very bones. But that careful nature afforded us a comfortable life and allowed us to provide for our daughter, Megan. Megan. A touch of bitterness soured the thought of her. Our only child, once the center of our world. Now 46, she works as a logistics manager for a large shipping company. She and her husband, Richard, make a point to visit once a month to check on me. Today was that day. I glanced at the calendar on the fridge, a needless confirmation. Every 3rd Saturday of the month, from 11 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon, like clockwork. I rubbed my temples, anticipating the usual headache that followed these visits, the unpleasant feeling they always left behind. The doorbell chimed at precisely 11. Punctuality was one of the few lessons from her upbringing that had stuck with Megan. "Daddy," she sang, embracing me with an enthusiasm that felt forced. "Are you losing weight?" You have to eat properly. Her hair, once a warm brown like her mother's, was now bleached to a pale blonde and cut in a trendy, expensive style. Her makeup was heavy for a Saturday morning, her perfume overpowering. "Hello, Megan," I gently disengaged, my eyes moving past her to Richard, who shuffled his feet on the porch. Richard Vance, my son-in-law of 2 decades. He was a tall man, with a bald patch he tried to conceal by combing his remaining thin hair across his scalp. An insurance appraiser, he was perpetually clad in a suit, his smile always looking strained. "Walter," he said with a nod, offering a firm handshake. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I led them into the living room, where I had already set out tea and a plate of biscuits. Megan immediately began to fuss, repositioning the cups and straightening the napkins. "Daddy, you should really let me hire someone to clean for you. You shouldn't have to work so hard at your age." "I manage just fine on my own," I replied, settling into my armchair. "Staying active is important." "But you could come live with us," she pressed on, avoiding my gaze. "You know we have that spare room. You wouldn't have to lift a finger. We had this conversation every month." Megan would push, and I would decline. Today, however, Richard was unusually involved. "She's right, Walter," he chimed in, taking a biscuit. "Think about it. A big house like this is a lot for one person. It could be sold. And what would I do with the proceeds?" I asked, my tone direct. Richard coughed, flustered. "Well, it would be your money, of course," he laughed, a little too loudly. "We're just thinking about your well-being," and Megan shot him an irritated glance. "Dad, we are worried. Since Mom passed, you've been so isolated." I set my cup down. "I've always been this way, Megan." Your mother understood that. The topic shifted, as it usually did, to general news and idle chatter. Megan spoke of her job, her co-workers, their upcoming vacation plans. Richard was mostly quiet, glancing at his watch from time to time. Then, he abruptly changed the subject. "You know, Walter," he started, his tone casual. "I was reading about how these scammers are going after seniors. It's terrible. You keep your savings in a secure place, don't you?" I studied him. "It's quite safe. The banks have some excellent senior accounts now," he continued. "Which bank are you with? Maybe I could suggest something with a better return." "The local community bank," I answered, watching his face. "I've been with them for 30 years. "Oh, not a bad institution," he nodded. "But their interest rates can't compete with the larger banks. Have you considered transferring? Or maybe investing? I know some excellent funds." "Rich," Megan interrupted, a strained smile on her face. "Daddy is too conservative for that." "Aren't you, Dad?" I nodded slowly. "I prefer to keep my funds where I can see them." "Cash." Richard leaned forward, a flicker of something in his eyes. "But that's so risky." "Not entirely cash," I replied, deliberately vague. "I have a deposit account. I have some bonds. And yes, a little cash in a safe deposit box. An old habit." I caught them exchanging a look, a fleeting, almost imperceptible glance. But I'd spent a lifetime poring over financial statements and spotting the smallest discrepancies. People were not so different. "And which branch is that safe deposit box at?" Richard asked with feigned casualness. "The same one," I said. "The community bank downtown." Megan suddenly stood. "Let me get these dishes, Daddy. And then we could run to the market." "Do you need any groceries?" They never offered to take me to the market. The suggestion was new, and it set me on edge. "No, thank you," I replied. "I have my groceries delivered once a week. It's very convenient." "But fresh produce, Dad." "Fruits, vegetables," she said, almost pleading. "Perhaps next time," I said, cutting her off. Soon after, their visit concluded. Megan gave me another fussy hug. Richard shook my hand with more force than usual. They left, promising to return in a month, or maybe sooner, just to check on you. I watched their silver sedan pull away from the curb, a vehicle I knew was beyond their means. I had long suspected Richard was drowning in debt. Clara used to say I was too critical of him, but Clara always saw the good in everyone. I saw the inconsistencies. That evening, I sat in my study, looking at an old photograph of Clara. It was taken on a trip to the coast, her hair caught in the breeze, her face lit up by a smile. That was how I chose to remember her. Vibrant, happy, real. "Something isn't right, Clara," I whispered to the picture. "And I don't like it." I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and took out a file. My financial records were in meticulous order. Bank statements, tax forms, investment summaries. I leafed through them, confirming everything was as it should be. It was odd that Richard had been so interested in my safe deposit box. It was odder still that I had mentioned it. Perhaps my age was making me less guarded. Or perhaps, on some level, I wanted to see how they would react. Either way, I knew I needed to be more vigilant. I pulled out my phone and made a calendar reminder to visit the bank on Monday to check the contents of my box, just to be certain. Twilight fell, filling the house with long shadows and memories of brighter days. I closed the folder and put it away. If Clara were here, she would tell me I was being paranoid, that our daughter would never do anything to harm me. But Clara was gone. And I had always placed more faith in numbers and facts than in people. And the facts were telling me that something was terribly wrong. I felt it with the same certainty that I felt the ache in my joints before a storm. I switched off the light and headed upstairs. I placed my glasses on the nightstand next to Clara's picture, then settled onto my side of the bed, leaving her half, as always, undisturbed. "Good night, Clara," I murmured into the quiet room. In moments like these, I could almost believe she heard me. ******. Monday was a rainy day. I watched from the kitchen window as drops pelted the roof of the garage, thinking about Megan and Richard's peculiar behavior. Their questions about my finances had left me feeling unsettled. Taking a sip of coffee, I checked the time. 9 o'clock. The bank would open in an hour. Visiting the community bank on a Monday morning had been my weekly routine for 2 decades. I would review my accounts, check my investments, and occasionally withdraw a small amount of cash for the week. My generation has a certain distrust of plastic cards. The phone rang. I answered, expecting a telemarketer. Dad, Megan's voice was unnaturally bright. "How are you this morning?" "I'm fine," I said, surprised by the call. She rarely called in the week following a visit. "Did something happen?" No. I just wanted to see if you were all right. Rich and I have been worried about you, especially after Saturday. You seemed distant." "I'm perfectly fine," I said curtly. "I'm on my way to the bank, as usual." There was a pause. "The bank? Today?" A note of alarm crept into her voice. "But it's pouring out there, Daddy. Why not wait until tomorrow?" "The rain doesn't bother me," I looked out the window. "Besides, I own an umbrella." "All right," she conceded reluctantly. "Just be careful. And Dad, you'll call if you need anything, won't you? Any help at all?" "Of course," I lied. After the call, my feeling of unease intensified. Why was she so concerned about my trip to the bank? I pulled a well-worn raincoat and a frayed umbrella from the hall closet. Before leaving, I double-checked the small safe hidden behind a painting in my study. Everything was there: my passport, birth certificate, the deed to the house, and my will. The bank was a 15-minute walk. Despite the rain, I preferred the exercise. Dr. Evans, my physician, was always reminding me of the importance of staying active. Inside the bank, I was greeted by Brenda, a teller who seemed to have worked there even longer than I'd been a customer. Her once red hair was now entirely silver, but her smile was as warm as ever. Mr. Croft, punctual as always. "Hello, Brenda. How are the grandkids?" We exchanged our usual pleasantries before I moved on to my business. I reviewed my accounts, everything was in order. Then, I requested access to my safe deposit box. "Of course," Brenda nodded. "Leo will take you back." Leo, a young bank employee I didn't recognize, led me to the vault. I unlocked my box and was relieved to find all its contents undisturbed: the bonds, the small stash of cash, and Clara's jewelry, which I was keeping for Megan, though she was unaware of it. On my way home, I had the distinct sensation of being watched. Glancing back, I saw a silver sedan, strikingly similar to Richard's, parked across the street from the bank. The moment my eyes fell on it, the car started and quickly drove off around the corner. Back at the house, the first thing I did was inspect my study. Something felt off, though I couldn't immediately identify what it was. The papers on my desk looked as I had left them, yet I had a nagging feeling they had been searched. I began to systematically check every shelf and drawer. In the bottom desk drawer, I kept a folder with real estate documents. It appeared untouched, but when I opened it, I saw that several pages had been rearranged. I have always been meticulous about such things and knew exactly how I had left them. A cold dread crept over me. Someone had been in my house, in my study, going through my personal effects. It could only have been Megan and Richard. No one else had a key. I took out my phone and called a security company. The following day, they installed cameras and motion sensors. The technician, a young man with tattooed arms, gave me an odd look when I insisted on a camera being aimed directly at my study. "Expecting burglars, Mr. Croft?" "Not burglars," I replied. "Family," he nodded as if he understood and asked no more questions. The next morning, the mail carrier delivered a letter from the bank. I opened it, expecting a routine statement, but found a notification of a request for a duplicate key to my safe deposit box. The letter explained that the request was made 3 days prior, on October 3rd, and that bank policy required them to inform the primary owner before issuing a replacement. My hand shook as I reread the letter. I had never requested a new key. Never. I immediately called the bank and asked for the manager, Mr. Garrison. Mr. Croft, how can I help you? His voice sounded professional. I've received a notice about a request for a duplicate key to my safe deposit box, I said. I never made such a request. A pause. One moment, sir. Let me check the system. I could hear the tap of a keyboard. Yes, a request was logged on October 3rd. It's standard procedure if a key is lost. Are you certain you didn't request it? Absolutely certain. My voice was firmer than I felt. I want that request cancelled immediately. And I want to know who initiated it. Of course, Mr. Croft. We will launch an internal investigation. Would you also like to change the access protocols for your box? Yes. And I want all access to my accounts restricted. No transactions are to be made without my physical presence in the bank. After speaking with Mr. Garrison, I sat by the window, watching the street and thinking. A plan began to form in my mind, a grim and simple one. Megan and Richard were attempting to get their hands on my assets. They knew about the safe deposit box, thanks to my own carelessness, and were now likely trying to forge documents to gain access. Before I could fully process this, the phone rang. It was Megan. Dad, are you home? Rich and I thought we might stop by with lunch. This was unheard of. 2 visits in 1 week. I'm busy, I replied coldly. Busy with what? I could hear the irritation in her voice. You're 78. What could you possibly be doing? There are still things to do at my age, Megan, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Perhaps another time. But we're already on our way, she insisted. We're just 10 minutes from your house. I gripped the receiver. Then I'm afraid you'll have to turn around. I'm leaving in 5 minutes. Where? She now sounded alarmed. To see my lawyer, I lied. A lawyer? Why? Personal matters, Megan. I'll call you later. I hung up before she could reply. Then I quickly got dressed and left the house, just in case they showed up anyway. I couldn't bear to see them, not now that my suspicions were hardening into certainty. Instead of a lawyer's office, I went to a local coffee shop. Sitting by the window with a hot coffee, I watched the cars pass. I took out a small notebook and began to list everything I knew: Megan and Richard's strange behavior, their sudden interest in my finances, the disturbed documents, the request for the duplicate key. I didn't notice anyone approach my table until a quiet voice said, Mr. Croft. I looked up to see Leo, the young bank employee who had taken me to the vault. May I join you? He asked. I nodded, surprised to see him. I'm not sure if I should be telling you this, he began, looking around nervously, but I think you need to know. Yesterday evening, I saw Mr. Garrison talking to a man in a nice suit. They were discussing safe deposit boxes, and I definitely heard your name mentioned. Mr. Garrison? I asked, confused. No, not Mr. Garrison. Another manager. Simon Trent. He works in client services. And the man with him, he said he was your son-in-law. The blood drained from my face. Are you certain? Leo nodded. Absolutely. They were discussing some kind of plan, and Mr. Trent said something like, it will all be ready by Friday. Why are you telling me this? I asked, studying his face. Because what they're planning is wrong, he replied. And my grandmother lost her life savings to scammers. I don't want to see that happen to anyone else. I thanked him and pressed a $20 bill into his hand, which he initially refused but finally accepted. Be careful, Mr. Croft, he said as he left. If I were you, I'd check all my legal documents. Mr. Trent, he specializes in powers of attorney and wills. When I returned home, I found a note on the door confirming Megan and Richard had indeed stopped by. Dad, call me when you get back. It's important I did not call. Instead, I reviewed the footage from the newly installed cameras. One camera clearly captured Megan unlocking the front door with her key, Richard following her inside. They were in the house for about 20 minutes, most of that time spent in my study. Before leaving, Megan placed the note on the door, and Richard slipped something into his pocket. I couldn't see what it was. I immediately began checking all my paperwork. The folder of bank statements was missing several pages. The deed to the house was in its place, but the final page, the one with my signature, was gone. I felt a chill as I grasped the full scope of their scheme. Later that night, as I was preparing for bed, the phone rang. I let the answering machine take the call. "Dad," Megan's voice sounded concerned. "We stopped by, but you were out. Please call me as soon as you get a chance. It's very important. It's about your health. Dr. Evans called us." He's worried I knew it was a lie. Dr. Evans would never call Megan, he respected patient confidentiality. Besides, I had seen him just last week, and he had told me I was in excellent health for a man my age. I switched off the phone and sat in the armchair by the window. The lights of the city that had been my home my entire life twinkled in the distance. Somewhere out there, my own daughter and her husband were plotting to rob me. "What would you do, Clara?" I whispered, looking at her photograph. Clara always saw the best in everyone, even when they didn't deserve it. But she was also a strong woman who never let anyone take advantage of her. "Kindness isn't weakness," she often used to say. I made my choice. Instead of a direct confrontation, I would give them just enough rope to hang themselves. I would allow their plan to proceed, but I would stay one step ahead. In the morning, I would call Mr. Garrison and warn him about potential fraud. Then I would contact the police. And finally, I would visit my actual lawyer to have my will redrafted. Megan would not see another cent of my money. I went to bed feeling strangely at peace. For the first time in days, I was certain of my path. As painful as my daughter's betrayal was, it had also freed me from my illusions. I now saw things with perfect clarity. With these thoughts, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Friday morning arrived under a cloudy sky. I woke before the sun, my mind churning with anxious thoughts. The young bank clerk's words echoed in my head, asterisk, "It will all be ready by Friday, asterisk." Today was that day, the day Megan and Richard intended to execute their plan. I had my breakfast earlier than usual, chewing my toast without tasting it. The phone rang at 7:30 a.m., sharp. "Dad." Megan's voice was too cheerful for such an early hour. "Are you up?" "Yes," I said flatly. "What do you want?" "I just wanted to let you know that Rich and I will be by to pick you up around 10. Dr. Evans scheduled a checkup for you." "Remember?" Another fabrication. Dr. Evans had scheduled nothing. "I have other plans today," I stated. "And please stop using my doctor as an excuse." "Dad," she huffed, her tone turning to annoyance. "You're being impossible. We're only trying to help you." "Not today, Megan. I have business at the bank." A pause. "The bank?" Her voice shook slightly. "But it's Friday. You always go on Mondays." "I've decided to change my routine," I replied. "It's good for the brain at my age." "Well, why don't we give you a ride?" she suggested, too quickly. "Then we can stop by the doctor's on the way back." "No, thank you. I prefer to walk." After we hung up, I called the police and reported my suspicions. Sergeant O'Malley, an older officer I remembered from his days walking a beat in our neighborhood, listened patiently. "Mr. Croft, if you're certain a crime is in progress, we can have a plainclothes officer meet you at the bank." "I would be very grateful, Sergeant." "The bank opens at 9, but I plan to be there at 8:30. I know the employee entrance." Next, I called Mr. Garrison, the bank manager. I told him about my suspicions and my conversation with Liu. "These are very serious accusations, Mr. Croft." Garrison's voice was wary. "Mr. Trent has been with us for 5 years and has a spotless record. Nevertheless, I am certain he is complicit in an attempt to defraud my accounts, I insisted. And I would like you to review the security footage from the past few days. Garrison agreed to meet me at 8:30 at the service entrance. I dressed more carefully than I had in years, putting on the fine tweed jacket Clara had bought me for our last anniversary, freshly pressed trousers, and polished shoes. If I was going to face my own daughter's betrayal, I wanted to do it with dignity. Before I left, I looked at Clara's photo. "I'm sorry, Clara," I whispered. I couldn't protect her from this. The bank was a short walk, but today I took a taxi. The driver looked at me quizzically when I asked to be dropped at the service entrance. "You sure, pal? The main entrance is around front." "I know," I said. "I have an appointment with the manager." Mr. Garrison was already there, glancing nervously at his watch. Beside him stood a stocky man in a suit who introduced himself as Detective Miller. "Mr. Croft," Garrison said, shaking my hand. "I checked the security tapes as you requested. I found something disturbing." We went to his office, where he played the footage from the last 3 days. One clip clearly showed Simon Trent in conversation with Richard at a cafe across the street. Another showed Trent escorting Megan into the vault area after hours, a flagrant breach of protocol. "This is extremely serious," Garrison said, turning off the screen. "If Mr. Trent is indeed planning to illegally access your box, we must catch him in the act." Detective Miller nodded. "We have enough to detain them, but it would be stronger if we catch them committing the crime. Mr. Croft, are you willing to cooperate?" "More than willing," I replied. "What's the plan?" The plan was straightforward. I would wait in an office adjacent to the vault while Garrison and Miller monitored the video feed. The moment Trent, Megan, and Richard attempted to access my box, they would intervene. "And if they don't show up today?" I asked. "Then we'll continue our surveillance," Miller replied. "But based on these tapes, and the information from your young bank clerk, today is the day." The bank opened at 9, and the usual morning customers began to trickle in. I sat in a small office, pretending to read investment brochures. At 10:15, the office door opened. It was Detective Miller. "They're here," he said quietly. "Your daughter, her husband, and Mr. Trent. They've just gone into the vault." My heart began to pound. It was one thing to suspect betrayal, but another to be confronted with it. "I want to see," I said, getting to my feet. Miller hesitated. "This could be difficult for you emotionally, Mr. Croft." "I have to see it with my own eyes," I insisted. "Otherwise, a part of me will always wonder." He nodded and led me down a corridor to the vault. The main vault doors were closed, but there was a small, private viewing room with its door slightly ajar. We approached it silently. Through the gap, I could see a portion of the vault and a table where Megan, Richard, and Simon Trent were sitting. In front of them sat my safe deposit box. I recognized the number etched on the lid. "Here is the paperwork," Trent said, passing a document to Richard. "The power of attorney appears to be authentic. The signature is notarized. Technically, we're operating within the law." "Of course we are," Richard replied with a smug grin. "Walter signed it himself. I knew it was a lie. I had signed no such thing." "And what if he comes to check the box?" Trent asked nervously. "He's here regularly." "Not today," Megan smirked. "I handled it. He thinks we're picking him up at 10. By the time he realizes we aren't coming, we'll be long gone." Trent opened the box and began to place its contents on the table. Bonds, property deeds, envelopes of cash. "How much is in here?" Richard asked greedily, snatching an envelope. "I'd estimate around 200,000 in bonds and 50,000 in cash," Trent replied. "Plus the deeds, which you can use to re-register the house." "Excellent," Richard said, rubbing his hands together. "My contact at the notary's office will backdate the paperwork. We'll own the house by this evening." "And what about the old man?" Trent asked. "We've already prepared the documents for the nursing home," Megan answered coldly. With his signature on that power of attorney, we can have him admitted. Dr. Hayes, a colleague of Rich's, is ready to certify him as incompetent. My stomach churned. My own daughter was plotting to have me committed against my will, to steal my home, my savings, everything Clara and I had built over a lifetime of work. That's enough, I whispered to the detective. I've seen and heard enough. Miller nodded and spoke quietly into his radio. A moment later, the vault door swung open, and 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by Mr. Garrison. Simon Trent, Garrison began, his voice official and stern. You are in violation of bank protocol and the law, providing unauthorized access to a client's safe deposit box. Trent went pale, dropping a stack of documents. Mr. Garrison, I can explain. They have a power of attorney. A forged power of attorney, Detective Miller interjected, stepping into the room. Megan Vance, Richard Vance, Simon Trent. You are under arrest on suspicion of conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and theft. Megan froze, her face a mask of shock. Richard tried to shove an envelope of cash into his pocket, but an officer quickly restrained him. What is this? Megan whispered. There must be some mistake. At that moment, I stepped out from behind the door and stood before them. Megan's face grew even paler when she saw me. Daddy? What are you doing here? Watching my only daughter attempt to rob me and have me put in a nursing home, I answered, my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside me. It's not what you think, Richard began, attempting a weak smile. We just wanted to help you manage your finances. Be quiet, Richard, I cut him off. I heard everything. The power of attorney, the nursing home, the phony incompetence diagnosis. All of it. Megan burst into tears, but they stirred no sympathy in me. There had been too many years of pretense, too many lies. How could you, Daddy, she sobbed. Call the police on us? We're family. A family doesn't steal from each other, I replied. And a family doesn't lock up their elderly parents to get their property. The officers placed all 3 of them in handcuffs. Trent was silent, his head bowed. Richard kept trying to offer explanations, mumbling about his debts and financial troubles as if they were some justification. Megan continued to weep, shooting me accusatory looks, as if I were the one to blame for her actions. Mr. Croft, Detective Miller said to me. We'll need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement. Are you ready to do that now? Right now, I answered firmly. As they were being led from the vault, Megan paused beside me. You'll regret this, Daddy, she hissed, her tears replaced by fury. You'll die all alone, and no one will even come to your funeral. I looked directly into her eyes, which once so closely resembled Clara's but now held nothing of my late wife. I am alone now, Megan. I have been for years, ever since you decided my money was more important than I was. She was led away, and I was left standing in the middle of the vault, surrounded by the scattered papers and shattered pieces of the life Clara and I had so carefully constructed. Mr. Garrison approached me, placing a hand on my shoulder. I am so sorry, Mr. Croft. The bank will, of course, compensate you for any damages and will conduct a full internal review. Mr. Trent will be terminated immediately. Thank you, I responded automatically, my mind still trying to absorb the reality of what had just transpired. Detective Miller escorted me to his office to give my statement. I answered his questions mechanically, signed papers, and provided evidence. My mind felt shrouded in a protective fog, insulating me from the raw pain of the betrayal. Mr. Croft, Miller said gently when we were finished. I understand how hard this is for you. I've seen my share of family betrayals, but it never gets any easier, especially when it's your own child. You know, the strangest thing, Detective. I looked at him, my eyes feeling heavy. I'm not even surprised. Deep down, I think I always knew that Megan saw me as little more than a bank account. I just didn't want to believe it. Miller nodded. Do you have somewhere you can stay for a few days? Sometimes, in situations like this, we recommend a change of scenery. No, I shook my head. I'm going home. It's my home, and I won't let them take it from me, not even for a day. Leaving the police station, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if a great weight I'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. No more pretending Megan and I had a normal relationship. No more making excuses for her coldness and avarice. The truth, however bitter, was liberating. I walked home slowly, appreciating the simple act of my own existence for the first time in a long while. The air felt cleaner, the colors of the autumn leaves more vibrant. At the corner of my street, I stopped at a small florist and bought a bouquet of white roses, Clara's favorites. At home, I put them in a vase next to her picture. You were right about so many things, Clara, I said to her smiling face. But you were wrong about Megan. She didn't turn out to be the good person you always hoped she would be. The phone rang several times that evening. I didn't pick it up. Later, I listened to the messages. One from Megan's lawyer, one from her mother-in-law, even one from a neighbor reporting that poor Megan had called her in a hysterical state. None of them asked how I was doing. No one seemed to care about the father who had been betrayed. The last message was from Megan herself, likely recorded from the police station. Daddy, her voice was hoarse from crying. Please, drop the charges. They're talking about real jail time. You don't want your only daughter to go to prison, do you? Think about what people will say. What Mom would think I deleted the message before it finished. Clara would never have approved of what Megan had done. Never. I sat in my armchair by the window, watching night fall over the city. A profound calm settled over me. I knew difficult days were ahead, the trial, depositions, perhaps even public notoriety in the local press, but I was prepared to see it through. For myself, for Clara's memory, and for justice. My phone rang one more time. I decided to answer. It was Detective Miller. Mr. Croft, I just wanted to let you know all three are being held pending their arraignment. The judge denied bail, given the severity of the charges and the flight risk. Thank you, Detective, I said. I appreciate your work. You're welcome, sir. And hang in there. It won't be easy, but you did the right thing. I hung up the phone, and for the first time that day, I felt tears well in my eyes. Not for Megan, I had long ago mourned the loss of the daughter I thought I knew. I cried for Clara, who had been spared the pain of knowing what our daughter had become. Perhaps that was for the best. Wiping my eyes, I went upstairs. It had been a long day, and tomorrow would be just as challenging. But for the first time in years, I felt I was in command of my own life. Whatever came next would be my choice, my decision. I got into bed and, as always, whispered goodnight to Clara. And then, for the first time in a very long time, I fell asleep quickly and deeply. ******. The weekend that followed the incident at the bank passed in a strange haze. I rarely left the house, seeking to avoid the curious stares of my neighbors. News travels with lightning speed in a small town, especially news as sensational as this: a daughter and son-in-law attempting to rob their own father with the help of a corrupt bank employee. On Monday morning, my doorbell rang. Mr. Garrison, the bank manager, stood on my doorstep, holding a leather briefcase and wearing a nervous expression. "Mr. Croft," he began, extending a hand. "May I come in? We need to talk." I showed him into the living room and offered him a coffee, which he politely refused. I sat across from him as he fumbled with the clasps of his briefcase and produced a folder. "First and foremost," he began formally, "I want to offer a sincere apology on behalf of the community bank for the event that took place last Friday. The actions of our employee, Mr. Trent, are completely unacceptable and contrary to every principle of this institution." I nodded but said nothing. Garrison continued, "Mr. Trent has been terminated, and we have launched a full internal investigation to ensure nothing like this can ever happen again." He slid a document across the coffee table toward me. "We would like to offer you compensation in the amount of $50,000 for the emotional distress and inconvenience this has caused." I glanced at the paper but did not touch it. "What about the criminal charges against Mr. Trent?" Garrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We would prefer to resolve this matter discreetly. $50,000 is a significant sum, Mr. Croft, and an assurance that your funds with us are entirely secure. You're attempting to buy my silence, I stated. It wasn't a question. A scandal of this nature could do serious harm to the bank's reputation, he said quietly, almost pleadingly. We have served this community for 70 years. Think of the people who might lose their trust in us, the depositors who would withdraw their savings. What about the depositors whose savings might be stolen by corrupt employees? I countered sharply. You must realize Mr. Trent has likely done this before, don't you? And he may not be the only 1 inch. Garrison paled. We have conducted a thorough review of all of Mr. Trent's activities over the last 2 years. No other discrepancies were found. That you were able to find, I finished for him. Mr. Garrison, I was a financial auditor for 35 years. I know how simple it is to conceal fraud when you know the system from the inside. I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. I will not be accepting your offer, and I will not agree to keep this quiet. Mr. Trent must face the full legal consequences, just like my daughter and son-in-law. Furthermore, I intend to sue the bank for gross negligence in securing its clients' assets. Garrison's face tightened with alarm. Mr. Croft, I urge you to reconsider. A lawsuit could take years. At your age. At my age, I interrupted, I have both the time and the resolve to see this through to the end. Now, if you'll excuse me. My lawyer will be in touch. After Garrison departed, I immediately called Arthur Finch, my oldest friend and my attorney. We had met in college, and though our careers had taken different paths, we had remained close. Arthur was one of the few who had attended Clara's funeral and had called me regularly in the years since. Walter, what on earth is going on? He asked the moment he answered. I just got a frantic call from Megan claiming you've lost your mind and had her arrested. You spoke to Megan? I was surprised. She was hysterical. Said it was all a big misunderstanding, that they just wanted to help you with your finances and you overreacted. Arthur, I took a deep breath. My daughter and her husband attempted to steal my savings and my home, forged a power of attorney, and had a plan to commit me to a nursing home. That is not helping with my finances. There was a long pause on the line. My God, he finally said. Are you certain? I saw and heard it all with my own eyes and ears, Arthur. They didn't know I was at the bank. I heard them discussing how they would get rid of me after they had my property. Walter, I am so sorry. Arthur's voice was filled with shock. I know how much you loved Megan. I did, I corrected him. That is now in the past tense. I need your help, Arthur. As my lawyer. I want to change my will to completely disinherit Megan, and I want to sue the bank. Sue the bank? Why? Their employee was an accomplice, Arthur. He gave them access to my safe deposit box without my authorization. The bank is trying to sweep it under the rug with a settlement offer, but I want a full investigation and a complete overhaul of their security procedures. If not, other elderly clients could be next. I understand. Arthur's voice shifted, becoming professional and focused. I can be at your house this afternoon with the necessary paperwork for the will. As for the lawsuit, we'll need to plan our strategy carefully. It could be a long fight. I have time, I replied, and sufficient funds for a good lawyer. Arthur arrived at 3 o'clock with a briefcase of documents and a bottle of fine scotch. We sat for hours, discussing the new will and the lawsuit. Under the new terms, the bulk of my estate would be left to a charitable foundation for the elderly, with a smaller portion endowed to a local college for the Clara Croft Memorial Scholarship for Students of Finance. Are you sure you want to cut Megan out entirely? Arthur asked as we finished. Not even a token amount. I'm sure, I said. She already tried to take it all. She will not get another dime from me. After the new will and legal documents were signed, Arthur and I opened the scotch and shared a silent drink in honor of Clara, and of all the things she would now never have to know. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Beatrice Dunn, Clara's dear friend and our neighbor for 30 years. "Walter, dear, how are you?" Her voice was thick with concern. "I heard the terrible news." "I'm managing, Beatrice," I replied, though it was only partly true. "Poor Megan stopped by last night," she continued. "She looked an absolute wreck. Said it was all a terrible misunderstanding, that you two had a fight and you called the police in anger." "It wasn't a fight, Beatrice," I tried to explain calmly. "Megan and Richard tried to steal my house and my savings. The police have irrefutable evidence." "Oh, my," she breathed. "But Walter, she is your daughter. Do you really want her to go to prison?" "I want justice, Beatrice. Megan is an adult who made her choice. Now she must accept the consequences." "But what would Clara think?" It was a low blow, and Beatrice knew it. Clara would be heartbroken, I conceded. But she also believed in truth and integrity. I will not betray her principles, not even in her memory. The call from Beatrice was the first of many from mutual acquaintances, people I hadn't spoken to in years who suddenly felt compelled to intervene. They all delivered the same message, think of Megan. She's your daughter. What will people say? Not one of them asked how I felt after being betrayed by my only child. By evening, I had silenced my phone, weary of the unsolicited advice and emotional manipulation. I sat in my study, sorting through old photographs. Megan as a baby, at her prom, on her wedding day. The happy family we never truly were. Or perhaps we had been, for a time. I couldn't pinpoint the moment it had all gone wrong. Was it when she met Richard? Or earlier, when she went off to college and returned a stranger? Or was there always a part of her that Clara and I, in our blind love for our only child, had refused to see? There was a knock at the door. I ignored it, hoping the visitor would go away. But the knocking came again, more insistent this time. With a sigh, I went to the door. Standing on the porch was Richard's mother, Eleanor Vance, a tall, severe-looking woman with the same unpleasant cast to her face as her son. "Mr. Croft," she began without a greeting. "We need to speak." "We have nothing to discuss, Mrs. Vance." I tried to close the door, but she wedged her foot in the opening. "My son and your daughter are facing prison because of your stubbornness." Her voice was like ice. "Is that what you want?" "Your son and my daughter are facing prison because of their own actions," I corrected her. "They committed a crime. They were simply trying to secure their future," she said, pushing her way into my entryway. "After all, that money was going to go to Megan when you died anyway. They were merely expediting the process." Her words, spoken with such casual entitlement, shocked me more than the crime itself. This woman truly believed her son had a right to my money simply because his wife might one day inherit it. "Get out of my house," I said, my own anger rising. "Now. Or I will call the police." Eleanor smirked. "Another scandal, Mr. Croft? The whole town is already gossiping about the old man who put his own daughter behind bars. What will they say when you call the police on me, as well?" "I don't care what people say," I said firmly. "I know the truth. Now, leave." She took another step toward me, her face contorting with rage. "You will regret this, Walter Croft. I will do everything in my power to see that Megan and Richard are acquitted. And when they are, they will take everything from you. Every last cent." I didn't reply. I just pulled out my phone and began to dial. Eleanor scoffed and turned toward the door. "This isn't over," she threw over her shoulder as she left. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling my legs tremble. I had never encountered such brazen greed and entitlement. This was the woman who had raised Richard, who had taught him he could simply take what he felt was his. A philosophy he had clearly passed on to Megan. That evening, I received a call from Detective Miller. "Mr. Croft, just giving you a heads up. We've learned the Vance family has retained a high-profile criminal defense attorney, a man named Julian Adler. He's known for his aggressive tactics." "What does that mean for the case?" I asked. "He will likely try to discredit you," Miller explained. question your mental state, claim you gave them permission to access the box and then forgot. Adler is known for trying to turn victims into aggressors. They have no evidence for that, I countered. No, the evidence is on our side, Miller agreed. But they can drag out the proceedings, make it an exhausting ordeal for you. Are you prepared for that? I am prepared, I answered without a moment's hesitation. I will not back down. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, contemplating the strange turn my life had taken. A week ago, I was a lonely old man visited by his daughter out of a sense of obligation. Now, I was a man who had sent that daughter to jail and was preparing for a legal war against my own family and a major bank. What would you have done, Clara? I whispered into the night, knowing no answer would come. But somehow, I felt she would have approved. She always stood for what was right, no matter how painful. The next morning, I woke with a renewed sense of purpose. After breakfast, I called Arthur and instructed him to expedite the lawsuit against the bank. I want it filed as soon as possible, I said, while I still have the strength for the fight. Walter, are you sure? Arthur's voice was filled with concern. This will be a difficult, emotionally draining process. I'm sure, I stated firmly. I will not let them win. Not Megan and Richard. Not the bank. Not any of them. All right, Arthur conceded after a moment. I'll file the suit today. And Walter? I'm proud of you. Not many people would have the fortitude to fight back in a situation like this. His words meant more to me than he could know. In a world where it felt like everyone was against me, it was vital to know at least one person was on my side. After my call with Arthur, I went for a walk, my first since the incident. It was a clear, crisp autumn day. I walked along familiar streets, past the homes of people I had known for decades. Some neighbors averted their gaze as I passed. Others offered a sympathetic nod or even stopped to offer a word of support. Mr. Croft called Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly widow from across the street. I heard what happened. Don't you listen to anyone who says you did the wrong thing. My son-in-law tried to do the same to me 5 years ago. I didn't have the courage to fight him then, and now I live in a tiny apartment while he lives in my house. I thanked her for her support, suddenly realizing that my situation was not unique. How many other elderly people had faced betrayal from those who were supposed to be their caregivers? When I returned home, there was an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside, a note was scrawled in Megan's familiar hand. Asterisk Dad, you have always been stubborn and cruel. All my life you controlled my every move, my every choice. You never understood what I wanted or what I needed. You think Rich and I are criminals? We just wanted what was rightfully ours. You hoarded all that money, but you never shared it, not even when we were desperate. If you don't drop the charges, I will tell everyone the truth about you. A cold, calculating tyrant who cared more for his money than his own family. This is your last chance, Dad. Drop the charges, or you will regret it. Megan Starr. I read the note twice, astonished by how twisted her perception of our past had become. I was never a tyrant. I was strict with finances, yes, but only to teach her the value of $1. I never denied her anything she truly needed. I paid for her college, her wedding, and helped with the down payment on their first home. Megan's note was not just an attempt at manipulation, it was a threat. She was threatening to slander my name, to rewrite our family history. But somehow, the threat held no power over me. I knew the truth. Clara had known the truth. And a few old friends knew it as well. I placed the note in an envelope and drove it to Arthur's office as further evidence against her. Attempting to intimidate a witness was another crime to add to the list. When I got home, the phone rang again. It was Mr. Garrison from the bank, with a new offer, $100,000 and a public apology, but still contingent on dropping the criminal charges against Trent. My position has not changed, Mr. Garrison, I replied. I am proceeding with the lawsuit. My lawyer is filing the papers as we speak. You are making a mistake, Mr. Croft, Garrison's voice turned threatening. The bank has considerable legal resources. This could drag on for years. Then we had best not waste any more time, I replied, and hung up. That evening, Detective Miller called with an update. The judge had set a date for the preliminary hearing for Megan, Richard, and Simon Trent for the following week. You will have to testify, Mr. Croft. Are you prepared for that? It can be emotionally difficult to speak against your own daughter in court. I am ready, I replied. I will speak the truth, no matter how painful it is. As I ended the call, I felt a strange sense of calm. A difficult battle lay ahead, against the bank, against Megan and Richard, against all those who wanted me to stand down. But I was ready. For the first time in a long time, I felt I was fighting for something that mattered. Not just for my money or my property, but for a principle. For justice. For the truth. We'll get through this, Clara, I said, looking at the picture of my wife. We always have, and for the first time since her death, I truly felt as though she could hear me. *****. The Bristol County courtroom was filled to capacity on the day of the preliminary hearing. It seemed the entire town had turned out to witness the family drama now playing out on a public stage. I sat in the front row with Arthur, maintaining an outward composure, though my stomach was tied in knots. When Megan, Richard, and Simon Trent were led in, I made myself look at them. Megan was gaunt, with dark shadows under her eyes. Richard tried to maintain a look of smug indifference, though his usually neat hair was disheveled. Trent looked utterly defeated, his shoulders slumped, his eyes vacant. "Are you all right?" Arthur whispered, sensing my tension. "Yes," I answered. "It's just strange, seeing them like this." Judge Wallace, a sharp-eyed older woman, called the court to order. The prosecutor laid out the charges: fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and violation of bank security protocols. The defense attorney, the infamous Julian Adler, a tall man with silvering hair and a confident smile, immediately moved for a dismissal. "Your Honor, this is a simple family misunderstanding that has no place in a court of law," he declared. "Mr. Croft, an elderly gentleman with potential cognitive decline, has simply misinterpreted the caring actions of his daughter and son-in-law." A surge of anger rose in me, but Arthur placed a restraining hand on my arm. "Stay calm," he murmured. "This is their strategy. They want you to lose your temper." Judge Wallace considered the motion for a moment before denying it. "The prosecution has presented sufficient evidence to proceed," she stated firmly, including videotape evidence and testimony that directly contradicts the defense's narrative. The next 4 hours were an ordeal. The prosecutor presented the evidence and called witnesses: Leo, the young bank clerk, Detective Miller, and a clearly uncomfortable Mr. Garrison, who was forced to testify against his former employee. When it was my turn to take the stand, I felt the weight of every gaze in the room. Megan looked at me with pleading eyes. Richard's stare was filled with barely veiled animosity. "Mr. Croft," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court, in your own words, what happened on the morning of October 23rd at the community bank." I took a steadying breath and began my story calmly and methodically, leaving out no detail. I described my initial suspicions: the overheard phone call, the discovery of the missing documents, and the notice about the duplicate key. "And what did you witness inside the bank vault on October 23rd, the prosecutor asked. "I saw my daughter, her husband, and Mr. Trent gathered around the contents of my safe deposit box. Richard was holding stacks of my bonds and envelopes of cash. I heard them discussing the power of attorney they had forged with my signature, and their plan to use it to transfer the deed of my house into their names. I heard Megan confirm that they had already prepared paperwork to have me committed to a nursing home, based on a fraudulent medical report stating I was incompetent." A hush fell over the courtroom. I did not look at Megan. I couldn't bear to see her expression. During the cross-examination, Julian Adler went on the attack. "Mr. Croft," his voice was deceptively gentle. "You claim you never gave your daughter power of attorney over your financial affairs." "Never," I answered firmly. "And you never discussed moving into a care facility should your health decline?" "Never in that context." Megan had suggested I move in with them, or into a home, on several occasions, but I always refused. Adler changed his line of questioning. "Mr. Croft, would you describe yourself as a frugal man?" "I am financially responsible," I corrected him. "Frugality and responsibility are not the same thing. And you never refused your daughter financial assistance when she was in genuine need." "I paid for her college education, her wedding, and helped them with the down payment on their house. I always helped when I saw a genuine need." "And who was the arbiter of a genuine need?" Adler pressed, a small smile playing on his lips. "Was it you?" "Objection," the prosecutor interjected. "Relevance." "Sustained," the judge agreed. "Mr. Adler, please stick to the facts of this case." The questioning continued for another hour. Adler tried to paint a picture of me as a miserly tyrant, a controlling old man who didn't understand the financial pressures a young family faced. But the facts were on my side, and his attempts to discredit me crumbled against the simple truth: Megan and Richard had tried to steal my property using forged documents. At the end of the hearing, Judge Wallace ruled that the case would proceed to trial. Megan, Richard, and Trent were formally charged and released on bail. As I left the courthouse, I was swarmed by reporters. Camera flashes, microphones thrust in my face, shouted questions. Arthur shielded me, guiding me toward a waiting taxi. "Don't say a word," he advised. "Let the court do the talking." But not everyone heeded that advice. The next day, the local newspaper ran a front-page interview with Megan, in which she portrayed herself as the victim of a cold, unfeeling father who valued his money more than his own child. "He always loved his money more than me," the paper quoted her. "Even when my mother was alive, he controlled every penny. My husband and I were only trying to secure our future, knowing my father could change his will at any moment on a whim." I folded the paper without finishing the article. It was amazing how easily history could be rewritten to justify one's own misdeeds. In parallel with the criminal case, my civil suit against the bank was progressing. The community bank initially denied all liability, claiming Trent's actions were a rogue employee's personal scheme. But when Arthur presented evidence of systemic security failures and a lack of proper oversight, their position began to crumble. The real turning point came when my case attracted the attention of other elderly customers of the bank. 2 others came forward with similar, though less dramatic, stories of financial irregularities that pointed to the same careless disregard for client security. One man had discovered unexplained withdrawals from his account, another found his investment portfolio had been altered without his consent. Arthur consolidated our cases into a class action lawsuit, and the bank grew seriously alarmed. The negative press was already causing a run on deposits. The bank's board of directors requested pre-trial settlement negotiations. Meanwhile, the criminal case against Megan, Richard, and Trent moved toward trial. The prosecutor offered them a plea deal in exchange for a lighter sentence. Trent accepted immediately, agreeing to testify against my daughter and son-in-law. Richard hesitated but eventually took the deal, recognizing the mountain of evidence against him. Only Megan held out, refusing to admit any guilt. "She still believes you'll relent and drop the charges," Arthur told me after one of the meetings. "Or that a jury will believe her story of the caring daughter protecting her senile father from himself." "She is mistaken," I replied calmly. The trial was set for mid-January, 3 months after the incident. In the interim, I received several more letters from Megan, all a toxic blend of accusations, manipulation, and veiled threats. I forwarded them all to the prosecutor without a response. In December, the community bank offered a final settlement in our class action suit, full compensation for all affected clients, a complete overhaul of their security protocols, the termination of several key executives, including Mr. Garrison, and a public apology printed in the newspaper. My portion of the settlement came to $450,000, a significant increase from their initial offer of $50,000. "Do we accept?" Arthur asked, showing me the agreement. Yes, I decided after a moment's thought. The money would not bring my daughter back, but perhaps it could do some good for others. Megan's trial began as scheduled in mid-January. Trent and Richard both appeared as witnesses for the prosecution, corroborating every detail of the fraudulent scheme. Megan looked utterly shattered as her own husband testified against her, describing how they had plotted the crime for months. It was her idea, Richard stated, refusing to look at his wife. She said her father was getting forgetful and that we needed to take control of his finances before he wasted his fortune. Megan's face contorted in a mask of rage and betrayal. Now she knew what it felt like. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a verdict, guilty on all counts. Judge Waller sentenced Megan to 3 years of probation, extensive community service, and a fine of $200,000. Richard, due to his plea bargain, received 2 years of probation and a $150,000 fine. Trent received 1 year of probation and a smaller fine, but was permanently barred from working in the financial industry. As the judge read the verdict, I looked at Megan, searching for any flicker of remorse. I saw none. Only anger and resentment, at me, at Richard, at the world, but not at herself. After the trial, Detective Miller approached me. "Justice was served, Mr. Croft," he said, shaking my hand. "Though I imagine this brings you little joy." "No," I agreed. "But it was necessary. Not just for me, but for other seniors who could become victims of schemes like this." "You're a very courageous man," Miller said. "Not many would have had the strength to see this through." I thanked him and left the courthouse, where Arthur was waiting. We were to mark the end of this painful chapter with dinner at a small Italian restaurant Clara had loved. But another person was waiting for me at the courthouse steps. It was Megan. She stood alone, without her lawyer or Richard. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup streaked. "Daddy," she began, her voice trembling. "Can we please talk?" I stopped and looked at her, at my only daughter, the person I had once cherished above all else. "About what, Megan?" I asked quietly. "I made a terrible mistake," she said, taking a step toward me. "I was under Richard's influence. He convinced me we were entitled to that money, that you would never understand our needs." "Richard testified in court that it was your idea," I reminded her. "He's lying," she cried. "He's a liar and a manipulator. Dad, I'm filing for divorce. I can't be with a man who would betray me like that. The way you betrayed me." She flinched. "That's different," she mumbled. "I'm your daughter. We're family. Family is supposed to stick together, especially now that I'm all alone." "With a huge fine you can't possibly pay," I finished for her. Megan dropped her gaze. "Yes. That, too. The house is mortgaged to the hilt. Our accounts are nearly empty. Richard gambled it all away on bad investments. I don't know what to do, Dad. You're my only hope." "Hope for what, Megan?" "Another chance at my money." I shook my head. "I have changed my will. You will not receive a single cent of my estate. It is all going to charity and to a scholarship in your mother's name." Her face twisted with fury, revealing the true nature of her supposed remorse. "You can't do that. I'm your daughter. Your own flesh and blood. Blood does not give you the right to steal, to lie, and to betray," I said calmly. "Goodbye, Megan." I turned and walked toward Arthur, ignoring the stream of vitriol that followed me. She shouted accusations, curses, threats, all the things she had likely been thinking for years but had kept hidden. "Are you all right?" Arthur asked as we got into his car. "Yes," I answered, and was surprised to find that it was true. "I'm fine." A month after the trial, I received a letter from Richard. He wrote that he and Megan were divorcing, that he was deeply remorseful for his actions, and that he hoped one day I might find it in my heart to forgive him. I did not reply. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. The settlement from the bank arrived in my account in February. I decided to put the majority of the funds to good use. After consulting with Arthur and a team of financial planners, I established the Safe Aging Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to providing financial literacy and security programs for senior citizens. The first workshop was held in March at the local community center. I expected a handful of people to attend. The room was packed. Over 50 seniors came, many with stories all too similar to mine. My son tried to get me to sign a power of attorney, telling me it was just for his insurance policy, one woman shared. My nephew was helping me with my online banking, another man said, and was systematically stealing small amounts from my account for over a year. I realized I had found a new purpose. Working with a team of volunteer lawyers, financial advisors, and social workers, we developed a comprehensive program to help seniors protect their assets, recognize the warning signs of financial abuse, and understand their legal rights. By the end of the year, our foundation had received a state grant and expanded to several neighboring towns. I found myself giving interviews on local television and speaking to groups at community centers. One day in spring, 6 months to the day after the incident at the bank, I drove past the house that had once belonged to Megan and Richard. A for sale sign was staked in the front lawn. A neighbor later told me that Megan had moved out of state to try and start over. Richard remained in town, working a low-level job at an insurance agency, the only place that would hire him with his criminal record. I felt no satisfaction, no pity. Only a quiet sadness for what could have been if greed had not torn our family apart. That evening, I sat in my study, preparing my notes for the next day's seminar. On my desk sat the photo of Clara, the one from the coast with the wind in her hair and the brilliant smile on her face. I found my way, Clara, I told her. It's not the path we planned, but it might be an even better one. I'm helping people now, doing something that truly matters. In the stillness of the house, I could almost hear her soft, approving laugh, the sound that had always warmed me on the coldest days. I closed my folder and switched off the desk lamp. Tomorrow was a new day, with new people to meet and new stories to hear. Life went on, and for the first time in a long, long time, I was glad to be a part of it. As I walked up the stairs to my bedroom, I thought about the strange ironies of life. The betrayal by my daughter, the most painful experience of my life, had ultimately led me to a new calling, a new community, and a new sense of meaning. Sometimes, from the deepest darkness, an unexpected light is born. I got into my side of the bed, leaving Clara's side, as always, untouched. "Good night, Clara," I whispered, just as I had every night for the last 3 years. And this time, in the quiet that followed, I could almost feel the silence answer back with a light, barely perceptible, "Good night, Walter." I smiled and closed my eyes, ready for whatever the new day would bring.